Welcome, everybody, live from New York. This is Spirit Matters. That's the name of our podcast, right? Spirit Matters. We are so glad that you are here. My name is Dal Grunga, and I'm here with my co-host, Kishore Chandra and Achyuta Gopi, and we are just so glad to be here this morning. How are we doing?
I am very awake.
Very awake.
Very.
Okay. And we got that from Kishore. Very awake. Good to know. Sometimes
Sheltered as
falls
always.
asleep on the podcast. Achyuta, sheltered as always. Sheltered as always. Beautiful. Thank you. I'm doing good. I'm doing all right. Still here, which is always a good sign. And we're blessed to have everyone here. Thank you. If it's your first time here, welcome. If it's your 10th millionth time here, welcome. Glad you're here too. We're so glad to have everyone with us. And we've been reading the Bhagavad Gita. Any announcements, updates, personal life stories, secrets, confessions, things that we need to get off the table before we go? Everyone's like, no. Okay. Then we will, oh goodness, march forward. We read a few verses yesterday. Chuta wasn't here with us. How's Nandi, Chuta? She wasn't feeling well yesterday.
Definitely doing much better.
Definitely doing much better. A lot of people are getting sick. There's
Just needed
stuff
some
going
mom
around.
hugs.
There's what?
Needed some mom hugs.
I thought she had smallpox. I was like, oh no.
No way. Also, I don't think she's contagious, so that's good. Like, I think it was mostly like she had like stomach nastiness.
Stomach stuff.
Not so great.
All
But
right,
now she's doing much better.
she needed some mom hugs. That's definitely part of the prescription. So we read chapter 3. We started chapter 3 earlier this week, and then we read verses 3, 4, and 5 because Kishore got really excited and loves those verses and wanted to read those verses. And so today we're on verse 6. Is that right, Kishore? So why don't we go ahead and read verse 6, and then also if there's anything we want to backtrack and look at that you find welling up in your inspirational self to talk about it, Chuta, we can look at that too from the previous verses. So someone want to start us off? Verse 6, chapter 3, Bhagavad Gita.
Bhagavad Gita.
Bhagavad Gita.
Okay. Verse 6. And just a reminder, because I kind of really want to hear Achyuta's take on it too. Verse 5 is where that was the last verse that we read, and it's such a good verse. And we spoke about it at length yesterday, but we could talk about it forever. This verse that we're all forced to act helplessly according to the qualities we've acquired from the modes of material nature. And therefore, no one can refrain from doing something, not even for a moment. So we read that verse yesterday. That was verse 5. And then verse 6 continues from there. Krishna says, one who restrains the senses of action, but whose mind dwells on sense objects, certainly deludes himself and is called a pretender. And I'll read one more. On the other hand, if a sincere person tries to control the active senses by the mind and begins karma yoga in Krishna consciousness without attachment, he is by far superior. Okay, wait, one last verse, because it kind of completes everything.
This is what he did yesterday. This is what he did yesterday, Chuta.
So he tells
we ended up in the 4th chapter.
He tells Arjuna, perform your prescribed duty, for doing so is better than not working. One cannot even maintain one's physical body without work. And I wanted to read that last verse because, again, Krishna is driving home this point that like action is inevitable, that in this material skin suit that we're living in. Like we have to do, just like think about how much we have to do to like maintain our body every day. It's like we wake up, take a shower, we brush our teeth, I hope, we do all the things and all this stuff. And, think about how much time it takes to, I was actually talking to your nephew, Achuta, on Instagram, because he posted something about cleaning the house and, being bad at it. And I sent him a message and I was like, oh my God. I was like, you do not even want to know, because I clean, I like do a deep clean. I'm like, yeah, I clean great. And like a week passes by and I'm like, how did everything get so dirty in just a week? Like, why do I have to do this again? And then I'm like, okay, it's, what, it's fine. And then another week passes by and I'm like, oh my God, this is a situation. So it's like, think about our house, think about our body, our mind. It requires kind of like this daily sweeping, this daily action, this daily cleansing. And so Krishna is really driving this point home that we have to act. And not only do we have to act, but we are going to act in accordance with our nature. And then he gives these two verses, 7 and 8, that when the sincere person has a sense of control over the senses and over the mind, and he speaks about this karma yoga, right, which he'll dive into a lot more. We spoke about it a little bit, but basically his actions in line with Krishna, then this is much better than someone who is just kind of dwelling on the sense objects or kind of like absorbed in that back and forth. That's my summary. That's where we're at today, but I'm excited to hear from all of you.
Give it to us, Achuta.
First of all, I love it when Krishna's like, do not quit your day job. I really love those verses when Krishna's like, don't quit your day job. And also, stop thinking that repression is going to work. It will not work. It won't satisfy you. It won't satisfy Krishna. It's not going to work. You are, and I really actually like calling people delusional. Like, you ever like it might be the New Yorker in me. But there are times where you're like, this person yeah, like this person is clearly delusional. But here Krishna is saying is like, all this repression is going to make you delusional. You are delusional if you think that, oh yeah, no, I've given it up completely. It's like your mind is still totally there. It's like, but I've given it up completely. It's fine. It's like, that is delusional. Stop thinking it's not going to work. And I really like the fact that it's not even going to make Krishna happy. And so at a certain point, he's like, listen, work with your nature to bring yourself to a state of God consciousness. Work with your nature, not against yourself. And I love that. It's super accepting, very, very realistic. And it just shows that God, the all-powerful, supreme person, almighty being, is not sitting there saying, okay, you have this insurmountable task and I'm expecting you to complete it all right now. He's like, I'm just expecting you to work with what you got and you'll get there. So I love it. I
have a question. I got a question. Were you going to say something, Kishore? I got two questions when it comes to this topic, and I appreciate that because I need to be reminded that I'm delusional often. But two questions. One is, I think a lot of people ask, because we talk about your nature, right? But there are things about me that I want to change. There are things about me that I habits, conditionings, ways of thinking, stories that my mind tells me that I do want to evolve and develop and leave behind, so to speak, like the old me, so to speak. I do want to change and evolve. So what does it mean for me to bring my nature with me? And what does it also mean for me to identify things about me that I don't want to change that are unhealthy? A. And B, how do I not use my nature as an excuse for unhealthy or disruptive behavior, where it's just like, I'm disturbing somebody or somebody doesn't like something about me and I'm like, well, it's just my nature, deal with it. It's just my nature. There's nothing I can do about it. Like, I'm a jerk because it's my nature, and so we wouldn't say my nature is to be a jerk, but I would say you're being a jerk, and you might say, well, it's just my nature. So how do we separate? How do you separate? I mean, we can talk about in the real. And I don't know if Kishore's laughing at me or my comments, or maybe he's been waiting to tell me that, Dayal, although you think it's your nature, you're actually being a jerk. You get what I'm
Well,
saying?
I'm not laughing at you.
Yeah.
I think that's
I think
something y'all
Kishore's
gotta
like,
handle
I've been waiting to bring this
off
up to
No,
you,
of
no,
Dayal,
no.
for a
Earth
long
matters.
time. And it's so comical how you're the one asking this question, because
That's
I've been
No,
waiting to
only
tell this to you.
no,
listen.
it's not about you.
Y'all have to like carry that outside of Spirit Matters, because we've only got 30 minutes for this family therapy session. But no, um, that I
16
feel
minutes
like,
now.
right? I feel like that brings in the age-old question of nature versus nurture, right? It's asking constantly, okay, what naturally comes with me, and what has happened to me? Like, what have I been conditioned to accept, think, project, attract, etc.? So sometimes, even when we look at anything, relationships, friendships, and such, people that we are bringing into our lives, we start to see a pattern. We start to see things like, oh, emotional blackmail might work on a person who has been fed emotional blackmail. We might, they're just, it's things like that. Like, and what you said was that I really like was, how do I know whether it's like my nature or whether things are unhealthy or toxic? And it's like, yeah, if things are unhealthy or toxic, then you want to detoxify them. Like, I think at a certain point we all start to get a sense of what is not working, versus the things that come naturally to us. Sometimes we're just good orators, right? Sometimes we're good painters. Sometimes we're really great creatives and we're awesome artists. Those things come naturally. And we do find a lot of people who come into spiritual life trying to give those up, thinking, oh, it's only Krishna conscious or spiritual to do one kind of activity or think one kind of way. Or like, there are people who say like it's only really acceptable devotional service to go out and distribute books to others. But the rest of it, you gotta fix that. That's not Krishna conscious. Um and I've seen it so much from artists. I have so many artist friends, and they come to me and they say, so many people will tell me this is not a real service. I'm like, that's natural. That's your nature, is to bring your creativity to Krishna consciousness. Kishore is like, that can't be. It is so certainly, it do be.
No, I know it's
It do
Somehow,
be. It
it's
do
so
be. It
it's so
be. It
crazily do
done.
I know.
It be done.
it
It
do
be
be.
done.
But
It be done to me by you. Please apologize.
and that's the thing, right? Krishna is saying, you have to do what comes naturally. He does not guarantee that you will get an apology from the people who have forced these things upon you. He does not guarantee that, like, okay, like, you get a tiger. The tiger's nature is to be a tiger. The tiger's not being a jerk for being a tiger. That tiger has its own tiger mind, and it is steeped in it. For us, the standard's a little bit higher because there is a level of consciousness and awareness that is there. And so, like you said, if somebody's like, but it's my nature to be a jerk, that's a choice, because inherently there is someone that we choose to be different for. We act on what we can get away with, and when people don't let us get away with a certain kind of action, etc., then we have this pushback. But I want to do this. But why? What is it? Like, sometimes we are helplessly forced to act, but then Krishna's going to get into it is lust only, Arjuna, which forces us to act. And so sometimes we have to think about, what is our nature? What is coming naturally to us, this swadharma, right? What is this natural action? And then where does it go towards this unhealthy place? And how can we use our intelligence to corral the mind? So Krishna is now talking about this balance. We have a balance. We have things that are natural, but we also have some things that are going to be really toxic that have been nature versus nurture, right? These things that have been fed and conditioned into us. How do we now use our intelligence to curb the mind, to not go so far into the toxic and unhealthy things? But we all start to know. We all start to get an idea, just as we all get an idea of the things that are good for us.
I love everything you said, and I got more questions, but maybe Kishore wants to.
Mm,
Do you want to say
yeah.
something before I ask more questions?
Yes, I do.
Yes, I do, because I'm done with your questions.
I first of all, I was laughing because not not about you, Dale. I was laughing because I've literally had that conversation with my partner Brudge many times. Not that I'm not that I'm a jerk, but I will be like, I'm a New Yorker, I'm loud, you know, like this is how I was raised, this is how we talk, this is how it is, I'm straightforward, I just call things how it is, like ba 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 ba. And for those of you that have met Brudge, both of you have met Brudge, he's like very quiet and very reserved and very, you know, just like very like well-mannered and just like this and whatever. And so like at the beginning of our relationship and the middle of our relationship and recently, that has always been
Before we met and last lifetime.
that has always been a clash, because it's like, you know, I am being like, well, this is how I was raised, you know, like, have you been to New York? No, you'll see, you know, when you get there, you just have to like be loud. You just have to yell at people. Like, that's how it is. You can't get by in the city if you're just like quiet. And Brudge is like, on the other hand, like, you have to like tone it down a bit. And I've always meditated on that a lot, because I really think about this question that Achyuta is bringing up about nature versus nurture. And what really came up for me while Achyuta was speaking is that, in a sense, I think when we look at things in a very dualistic way, it can get us into trouble, and it can drive us into a place of like, you know, Krishna only wants me like this, you know, or being spiritual only looks like this. Because it can go into a place of like, well, you know, spirituality, like my anger isn't allowed in spirituality, or my loudness isn't allowed in spirituality. You know, it means looking like this, you know. And something really cool about Krishna consciousness and about bhakti is that all things can be dovetailed towards Krishna. And it really is more about the intention of what we're doing and how we're doing it and what we're doing it for. In the purport to verse 8, which we read, which is the one where Krishna says that one can't even maintain one body without work. Srila Prabhupada says something so lovely, and this topic is covered a lot in Sri Ishopanishad, but he says that anyone who is in the material world is certainly possessed of the impure propensity for lording it over material nature, or in other words, for sense gratification. Such polluted propensities have to be clear, etc., etc. And he goes on, you know, speaking about this. And I think that that's really like the crux. It's like, if my so-called anger, if my so-called, you know, loudness or jerkness or whatever it is, if I'm using it kind of to like hurt other people, to lord it over other people, to manipulate and control other people, because, you know, if you think about other emotions too that are not, I think anger gets a bad rap because it's so like loud and extroverted, but it's like there's so many other emotions that you can use to like, whew, like really get in there and work your way around things and manipulate. And so it's like, what is the intention? Am I using this to lord it over material nature, to control people, to get my way no matter what, to et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Or can I, you know, go inward and really start to ask those questions? And that's a unique and personal journey that everyone has to do. It's like, where's this anger coming from? You know, like, why am I angry? Is it just that I'm a loud New Yorker, or is it something else, you know? Or like, where is this, you know, sadness or this grief, or, you know, this extreme desire, you know, this neediness or whatever, like, where is this coming from? And I think that at least my experience has been that the more and more that I whittle it down and find out where it's coming from, I get to a sincere answer. And I'm like, okay, you know what? Yeah, I have a right to be angry, or, you know what? Yeah, like this is coming from somewhere real, but now let me not use this to mess with people. Like, let me not use this to mess with myself. Let me not use this to further entangle me in the material stuff. And let me just like jump like a crazy person in kirtan and just get this out in that way. Or let me, you know what, let me serve the deities in a really beautiful way and pray for them and pray and use this love and neediness that I have for the deities, or somehow dovetail it for Krishna. And that's how we start to spiritualize or Krishnafy these emotions, as opposed to just like, I don't want to feel this, and being a loud person is bad, so let me just stuff it down and I don't feel anything, you know? Because like Achyuta was saying, and Krishna speaks about so much in Gita, repression is not going to get you anywhere. And if anything, it's a recipe for disaster. That's what I
Recipe
got.
for disaster.
I like it. I love it so much. And I feel like in just these 3 verses, so many times the word like pretender has been used, and I really like that word. Gorgovinda Maharaj also used to like this word. He would say it all the time. Don't be a pretender. And we know when we're doing it. We say fake it till you'll make it, and we teach children that, you know, for all of our lives. Fake it till you make it. But then when are the times when we drop the guards, we drop the fake it till you make it, we drop the pretending, and we say, I don't think I understand this point yet. Like, what do I do if I'm not there yet? I want to get out of these like toxic cycles, but I'm not quite there yet. That is the place where we make spiritual advancement. That's actually the place where we make spiritual advancement, because we finally dropped the act and we're allowing Krishna and the people who hopefully have our best interests at heart in to see that we can't fake it all the time. So when do we drop it? And like Arjuna say, I'm a little lost. I'm a little bit not there yet, and I can't keep this act up. And when we're there for one another, and when we allow Krishna to be there for us, I feel is when we start making those jumps in our spiritual lives. That's when the faith starts to get real.
I got more questions. But well, one of the things you answered one of my questions initially, Kishore, and I was, thinking that we can spend, because one of the things I think is so beautiful about this podcast is, in addition to sharing Bhagavad Gita and just discussing spiritual principles, is when we bring it into our own lives, and when we ourselves discuss how this intersects with what we're going through on a daily basis. And so one of my questions was related to where have we found ourselves either struggling to find our nature, or struggling to embrace or accept our nature, or that same thing that you were discussing, Achyuta, when I asked you that question about, like, one of the things I think, and I wrote it down somewhere in the chat here because I really liked it. At a certain point, we all get a sense of what's not working. And so where do we, and at the same time, Kishore, you were talking about, like, with your partner, like, this is just who I am. I'm from New York. I'm loud. I blah, 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 which I get, for me, I'm like that times 1,000, because it's like, I'm a Scorpio, I'm Pitta, you're also a Scorpio, and you're also got some Pitta, but you're also Kapha. Anyway, so, but like, I've got like Italian background, and I've got whatever it is, and I'm just like loud, and it's like, deal with it. And then all of a sudden, like, I have no friends and nobody was responding to my text messages anymore. And why is that? But then realizing, and so the point that I wanted to bring in, is I wanted to talk more about our personal experiences of discovering, learning about our personal natures and embracing that after years of attempting to practice spiritual life, and what that looks like, and what has worked and what hasn't worked for us. What are the things that I've noticed I've worked? And because also sometimes we discover what our nature, because we really have 2 types of natures that are described in the Bhagavad Gita. We have our Sanatana Dharma and our Swadharma. There's different words you could use for these, but Krishna uses this word Swadharma. He'll use this term later in the Bhagavad Gita, and in this very chapter, when he talks about the very famous verse where it's better to be you than to try to be somebody else, even if being you looks messy. That's basically the sum and substance of what he's saying. And then when he says being you, he uses this term swadharma. The dharma means your nature, your identity, who you are. But he's talking about who you are in this life. The artistry you're talking about, the uh the business mind that you have in this life, the nurturing side that you have in this life, whatever that may be. But then we also have our sanatan dharma, which is the eternal self that's beyond this life. That's the eternal soul that Krishna spent so much time talking about in the second chapter. And I was thinking of this verse from the Chaitanya Charitamrita when Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu sort of juxtaposed these two things. And he had that very famous verse where we get the phrase das and udas for, like, I'm the servant of the servant of the servant, my eternal Krishna Swarupa Hoy, Jivara Swarupa Hoy Krishna and Nityadas, the idea that, like, we're all eternally servants of the supreme reality, of the supreme person. So he has this beautiful verse, where we have this idea of Varnashram Dharma, about various spiritual and social orders of life. And he says, I'm not a Brahmin or a Kshatriya or a Vaishya or a Shudra or a Brahmachari or a householder or a Vanapras or a Sannyas. I identify myself only as a servant of the servant of the service of the lotus feet of Sri Krishna, the maintainer of the gopis. He is like an ocean of nectar, and he is the cause of universal transcendental bliss. He's always existing with brilliance. And so I think that for me, what it does is it and at the same time, when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was here, 500 plus years ago, he did at a period of time was a householder, and he did accept the order of sannyas, and he was born in a Brahmin family. So he did have particular external social orders that he followed, but underneath all of that, it was, how am I using my nature in a mood of service to others? And so I think that's always sort of like the Rosetta Stone. That is the lens in which I view and bring my nature into the world. If it's just like, this is my nature, deal with it, then it's like, it's not getting me. That's what's not working. That's not going to get me or anybody anywhere. But it's like, this is my nature. I can't change my nature. Like, this is what I've been given. These are the raw goods that I have. But I do get to mold it in such a way that uplifts me and other people. And how can I use what I've been given in service? I've got a fiery Pitta, New York, born and raised in Queens, don't look at anyone on the subway upbringing type of nature. Okay, so what does it mean for me to use that and to move through the world with humility in a way that I can use this in a way that is of service? And I think that constantly allows us to refine ourselves rather than just kind of walk around with jagged edges. And there's more that, we're always out of time. And we're running, we're at time. But those are the things I wanted to talk about, was more personal kind of reflection on our side in terms of like where this shows up, and then also the idea of what it means to the mood in which we embrace our nature. I think makes all the difference in a spiritual context. Hare Krishna.
I think one last thing I'll say before we hand it over to Kimberly to wrap it up
is,
I have found that it gets so much more slippery to distinguish nature from nurture when it is something which is spiritually applauded. An example, I am kind of good at renunciation. If I'm not hungry, I won't eat, and I'm not hungry a lot, but I love food, right? If I'm like, oh, that's not so great for me, I'll just renounce it. And that is applauded spiritually. However, the problem comes in, and it gets to be a slippery slope when it comes to people. I will renounce people. I'll be like, well, I renounced that. It's done. Now, is this something which is part of my nature? Yes. This little facet of renunciation, sure, is a part of my nature. Is it beneficial when it comes to people all the time? No. And was it originally part of my nature? Not exactly. But because I've gone through so many experiences where people have kind of just left or dropped or whatever, I've become good at renouncing and dropping people, but that's not always healthy for me. Nor is it a good barometer of building other relationships with other people, which association is essential to our spiritual lives. So there are some things that can be spiritually applauded, right? We have these tenets that are just blanket tenets, and they can be spiritually applauded. And we think, no problem, I got that down. That's great. But what I love is, and we can talk about this more tomorrow, this story of Sudama Brahman. He's a great friend of Krishna, really, really poor, super renounced, like really poor, super poor. He goes to Krishna. Krishna gives him all of this wealth. He comes back home. His house looks like a palace. It's a whole mystical Christmas miracle, right? Now, we might think that's amazing. Krishna just did a miracle. It's awesome. Purports from our various acharyas and teachers say that Krishna did this to break the pride of renunciation. There was a subtle pride of renunciation that this Brahmin had. Krishna breaks it by giving him all of this stuff. Now Sudama has this choice. Do I look at this or do I take my renunciation? Renunciation is spiritually applauded. Wealth is not. Sudama takes the wealth. He says, but my friend gave this to me. And so he must be doing this for my ultimate good. Let me give up this pride of my renunciation. And so sometimes I'm looking at the people in my life going, I could just go in a cave and renounce everybody. Cool, no problem. But is that actually what's best for me? Sometimes I'm thinking, no, it's not. The association is key. And I need to actually look at if this is helping me in the long term or not. And where does this come from?
That is a big one and a great one. I actually started writing these things down because I want to follow up on them, and I can see I can see into the future. 24 hours from now, we will be like, what did we talk about yesterday? There was a really good point we wanted to follow up with. But there was the 2 points that I was making: the personal reflections of discovering our natures, and the idea of integrating our natures in mood of service. And what you shared, Achita, which is so powerful, the idea of like, sometimes it's really hard to discover what our real nature is and how much we're avoiding that when we're also dealing with or navigating the things that get applauded externally, you know? And sometimes my lower natures, or I might be doing something externally for the wrong reasons internally, but it gets applauded by other people because they think, oh, I mean, this happens often, even outside of spiritual circles, and we're going way over time here, but like, like little kids, it's like, you're such a well-behaved little boy. But actually, it's like, no, I'm repressing my emotions and sacrificing myself because I don't want to rock the boat. And I'm actually living in anxiety and fear. And so I'm trying to just be a good person. But actually, it's like, I feel a need to like whatever. And it's like, oh, you're such a well-behaved little boy. Or, oh, you never complain. That's so beautiful. It's like, actually, it's like, okay, now I'm just learning to shove it anytime I feel something uncomfortable because I want to be the person who never complains, And so I think that becomes something messy in how we deal with that. But I feel like we can jump all over that.
Wait, I have something to say. Last thing, someone write this down for tomorrow. I think a huge thing also in terms of repression and nature and all this stuff, for anyone who's like part of a marginalized community or who's an immigrant or who's a person of color, you're so articulate and you're so well-mannered. And you're, wow, you speak so well. And like, I had no idea, like all of this stuff is just like cringe to the umph degree. But then it goes to that question of like nature, nurture, because like in American society, whatever, Western society, like there's this idea of like what it means to be well-mannered. And then it's like really a society made of immigrants. And then you have people telling immigrants or people of color, you speak so well. You speak so well. Look at that, and it's very interesting. And we can talk about it more tomorrow when we speak about personal stories. I have a story about that. Remind me that I have a story about
personal stories are great. I wrote down cringe to umph degrees, immigrants, minority groups, well-mannered. That will trigger us back. Okay, guys. We have options to just double it up and go double time today, or turn to Kimberly and go to our wrap it up Acharya. That's the name we've given Kimberly. And so we're gonna go with option 2. We want to hear from you, Kimberly. What are you wrapping up? Model minorities, Kishore wrote there. Okay, I'm gonna write that one down. Hashtag model minorities for tomorrow. Kimberly, what you got for us?
All right. Today we're taking away to not quit our day job.
Gotta pay the bills.
Repression, yeah. Repression is a recipe for delusion. Work with and not against our nature. It's better to follow our own path imperfectly than to follow someone else's perfectly. And all things can be dovetailed towards Krishna.
Okay, I was muted. Final words. We've had a lot of final words, so we gotta get a short final word we need here.
Hare Krishna.
Okay, that's a great word. Hare Rama.
Krishna knows who I am, and he's working with me.
That's a great one. I'm just looking forward to tomorrow. Tune in tomorrow, everybody. We got a lot coming. So grateful for you guys. So grateful for the personal reflections, for being real, for being you. I love you both, and I'm grateful for everyone here that's listening and with us. If you heard something you like, share it with a friend, write it down, take some time to reflect on what this means for you. And if you ever got a story or question or anything you'd like to share with us, we're always here for you. Write to us at spiritmatters@bhakticenter.org. Love you guys so much. Be well, take care, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.